Because when I was there, it goes fast for the war. Yeah, no, no kidding. I know. I should do that. Yeah, you went up farther up into that height and then the road was not in Christ, they went up into the west. Oh, no, it's called the. Are you hiking or are you? They are side by side. Oh, you're side by side. Nice. Yeah. I know. Okay, yeah. So we've rented them a few times. Been up with tours, where they're remodeling somebody out. And then probably rented them and stayed in that yeah, that's a you can't get. You like that one? Everybody is. Oh, yeah, so, yeah, the other most called. I use them in the aircraft. Oh, wow, good to know, because, I think collaborative you can't go online, so. I just I know people are twice now. I got one. Somebody breaks me down. And fortunately, the both of those guys have it here, the tour, so. Yeah, so it's sort of how it is. So that's about as easy as it comes. Yeah, they'll have it in this one. Yeah. Oh, really? Yeah. That's why I love. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Like you said, on the machine. Everybody has a section. Yeah. Well, this happened one time in Africa. We were and the guy tells everybody, listen, everybody's an office. I mean, people just vacation. Couple retired couples working. And then, tell them, you're going up the hill, go back up the gas or eat different appointments. And we were going really secret. We got up and going. And finally, he's probably. That's all. I just looked back and sure enough, they made it to the top. That's when I realized that we were out there. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. I say, burning on it. Oh, really? People pushing. Okay. Will you get that down? Have you ever done that? I got you. Yeah. I can get it down a little down, so we get that done and get started.
This one here, the director's.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, we're good to go.
Okay, welcome everybody. We'll start the meeting tonight for the town council meeting for February 17th, 2022-21 for the town of Apple Valley. If you can join us in pledge allegiance to our flag. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Pledge allegiance is one of my favorite things to do. Before we begin our meeting tonight, we're going to yield the floor to Chief Barlow, Kevin Barlow, who's over to make a presentation. Mr. Barlow, welcome.
Thank you, council members, and Mayor Marty's on, I believe.
He is.
Good. And every year we Hillsdale Colorado City Fire Department selects a response partner of the year. Even though it's a little bit belated here at the end of 2020, we felt like that the Apple Valley Fire Department had assisted us many times and made a great difference in a couple of incidents that they responded on. We did some good training together, and we felt like that the effort that they've made in the last several years to improve their response and come up to a professional standard is remarkable. So with that in mind, I present this plaque of Response Partner of the Year in appreciation for prompt response and professional cooperation at numerous incidents throughout the year. And make that to Chief Zold, and of course, we know who does the work, so we appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that time.
Most of this, this really is a team, and these guys all have responded and helped on many incidents. So this is really a big fire department thing, and we really appreciate this from Colorado City here, though. They've been immense in helping us also through EMS and other incidents. They're great, a great neighbor. So thank you.
Thank you.
That's a good point. This is Lauren Bundy. She's a firefighter for our fire department. Emma Black, she's a new firefighter. Anthony Motor, he's a lieutenant. He was updated to a lieutenant 6 months ago. And then Andy McGinnis is one of our captains.
I'd also like to recognize Louis Ford, who's here with us tonight too. Louis is a long-time serving the fire department. We appreciate all of your work. Thank you very much. While we're on it, we're going to move on to agenda item number 3 to the front. We could have Richard Fisher and Jerry Jorgensen to the front, please.
Seriously? Yeah, we're serious.
Yeah, we're serious. We'd like to have you guys come up. We'd like to send a resolution of appreciation to Mr. Fisher and to Mr. Jorgensen. This is dedicated to these gentlemen, signed by all the city council members and the mayor for their services, primarily for their dedication to voluntary work. I don't think that any of us in America could get by without volunteers at any level in our public services, our private life, our church services, our school services. And these two gentlemen do a great job in helping us develop our streets and maintain our roads here and multiple facets of work around town. We'd like to take a moment to say thank you. We appreciate you, and it's great having you be part of our community. Thank you. And on the final note is Debbie Proctor tonight. Is she on the line? Debbie, you're on with us? She's muted right now. Debbie has been a council member here for 3 years, I guess it is, yeah. And she has decided she's going to resign this past week and move on to other things. We want to take a moment to recognize what a great job she's done, and we've enjoyed having her here and her services and being able to donate her time and help drive this community. She's done a great job. We're going to miss her and wish her all the best. And thank you, Debbie, if you can hear us. Thank you very much. On the agenda tonight is item 1, zone application change for AB 1365-J-1 from open space to rural estate, 20 acre. The applicant, Mr. Pearson, is just changing this so he can build a lot of them. So unless anybody has anything they want to go into on, any questions? Marty, I think you hear us. Mayor?
What's that?
Do you have any questions on item 1?
No, I sure don't.
We entertain a motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept the change for the application for Apple Valley 1365-J-1 from open space to rural estate 20.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Vote beginning with
Aye.
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 Motion carries. Item number 2 is zone change application for AB-1330-C from open space to agriculture, open space agriculture to 10 acre A10. Applicant, what's that one? Walter, there we go. Same thing, we see he wants to build a home on his property. Any questions on this one?
No. I didn't see any issues with it when I read through it, so.
Okay, we'll entertain a motion.
I'm moving approve application for AB 1330C for open space to agricultural 10 acre.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Vote.
Aye.
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 Motion carries 4-0. Item number 4, presentation by Sunrise Engineering on the flood mitigation plan for Apple Valley proper, for the detention basin. You've got a presentation, I think you want to show us?
Yeah, it's got a PowerPoint on there right now. So just talking with the mayor, I think he wanted us to just give a little bit more of a scope and say, you know, why we're doing, why we've recommended some of the improvements that we've recommended. And so we're just going to go through a few of those things. My name's Nate. If you have any questions, feel free to just pipe up and ask. This is Mark. He's with me. He's going to be helping out as well. So first off, this is an overview of Apple Valley, and it shows the extent to how far the flow of rain travels before it gets into town. So I don't know if you can see it, but in fact, you probably are all aware, but it comes from way up high on the mountains and it travels all the way down. And all the flow is routed right into that east side of the plateau. What's that street called again? It's
Main Street.
not Main Street. It goes past Main Street and then it goes to the little cul-de-sac, Mount Zion Drive. Yeah, so all those headwaters kind of converge and head right into that area. Other areas that we have a lot of problems on are coming off of the top of the plateau and drain down. So I think that's Rome Way. We have quite a bit of problems that we've seen with flooding there. And then even we've got some problems across the highway where we've got little washes that go right over the road. So we recommend improvements for each of those. This is Rome Way right here. Just a picture of what can happen through these floodings or through the floods. That's Mount Zion Drive. So we found that in that area, there's actually a few really low spots. Basically, the elevations of that area make it so it's, you know, if there wasn't a ditch through it, that would just be a pond every time. Every time we got rain, and when we get significant amount of rain, the model showed that we would have quite a bit of water moving through that area. And then what happens, all that water that comes off of the top of those cliffs, it comes down, it focuses in Mount Zion Drive, it cools up, and then it comes and crosses, I don't know if we can go back to one of the first slides. Yeah, right. This one, yeah. So I don't know how well you guys can see it, but it comes through here, crosses the drive, and then it goes. That last photo was a photo of a lady's home. This is the back of her property.
That'd be Chris Kingsley's.
Chris Kingsley's.
Yeah.
So we can see that the flow, you know, it causes pretty significant damages
That was
throughout
about 3 times.
all of Apple Valley.
Before we
Yeah,
started trying to help her put it back.
right. So now we just kind of wanted to explain, you know, those are some of the problems that you all know happen. And then this is how we're going to try, or we plan to combat those problems. And first off, you can see on that right side, there is a drainage channel. Now that is going to catch probably 2/3 of all the flow that comes through the town.
In the pink there.
No, this is the black line to the right. Just straight down the center of the, yeah.
On the right, Main Street, okay.
It's not quite Main Street. It's more on the boundary of the parcels there.
It's behind the mayor's house and Walter Josie's house.
Where's Main Street?
Further
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it just borders that property line there. And basically what that does, it's going to catch the majority of all the water that's heading right to the circle and then out to the other outskirts or to the west side of town. So that'll mitigate, you know, probably 90% or probably 80% of the problems by having that flow just get stopped and then come down to the wash. Now, it doesn't quite take care of all of the flow up above to the north of town. And we've got still a decent bit of drainage that comes through there. And so that's why we have a detention basin scheduled to go there. Now, if that detention basin is not there, because of the low elevations, there's still going to be ponding in each of those areas there in Apple Valley, just because they're lower than the exit path. And so that between that channel and the detention basin, that pretty well takes care of most all the storm water that enters into that east side and then routes around to the other side. So it alleviates all those problems. And then throughout the rest of town, we also noticed that a lot of the borrow ditches weren't sufficient. A lot of things on Rome Way were getting washed out almost every time. And so included in the plan was a plan to rework those borrow ditches and make sure that the whole town is conveying the stormwater properly. We've got calculations for how big the drainage is going, or the borrow ditch is going to need to be in front of each of the houses. And so we should be able to move water through in a way that's not going to flood. But obviously it'll need to be cleaned out after each flood sequence, but at least you won't have water in your homes. So, Mayor, if you have anything to add, this is kind of.
Well, yeah, I got a question for you. I'm looking at the width of those channels you're showing, 16 and 24 and 34 feet wide. How deep are those?
Maximum of 6 foot.
That's just amazing that it's hard for me to picture how much water it must be coming there. You got to have a channel that wide and that deep to conduct that water.
Right. A lot of reasons. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's no wonder it floods so bad over there.
Yeah, the big reason why it has to be that wide down there is because the area is basically flat. And when you've got the flat land, the water pools up a lot. And so to get past that flat portion, it had to be wide and deep to get it through.
All right, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
The retention basin that I'm looking at, this is on the applicant of the Wells family subdivision, right?
I'm not
Location of it.
I'm not sure whose property it's on.
Mayor, is that correct? Isn't that on
Travis Wells, is that
Travis
right?
as well?
I think so. I think that's what.
You know, we've had some discussions in public forum in the past about this particular subdivision that we've been working with, and I think I'm glad that everybody has a chance to see this map, because that particular applicant has stepped up to volunteer some ground, even some dollars to help us solve the overall problem of this drainage. And I think this is a perfect scenario when the town and developer of property can work together to try to solve larger problems, but not just individual problems.
Nate, come on. So, because we have that list there, just kind of for everybody's clarification, doesn't mean nobody can develop their land, do anything with their land. All they gotta do is put some culverts there, build a little bridge over it, and it will still let water flow. It's not really gonna limit anybody's use of their land, really, right?
Yeah, exactly. And there's provisions that are in the plan, basically say, you know, when you develop, just make sure that your footprint's the same as before you were there. And so, yeah, if you just find a way to route that stormwater there, you're good.
The same connections what you have.
Yeah. So.
I have a question. Is it okay if I ask a question?
Sure.
Okay. What percentage of the water that's draining towards Apple Valley comes from the land area to the east of Main Street in comparison to the land area that's west of Main Street? Can you
Can we go up that first slide? So you can see the catchment area. This is where all the water comes from. So if you look and see about where that number 2 is and that vertical line that comes down, that's where Main Street is, the blue vertical line. So just, you know, eyeballing it, it's looking like probably 55% comes from east of Main Street, and another 45% comes from west of it, but I don't have the exact number.
Okay, so based on that percentage, did you put some thought into having this this channel over by Main Street, say on the east side of Main Street, which would help possibly protect the road and also reduce the amount of water that's coming in to the west side properties of Main Street and reduce the size of the channel? In other words, having either one large channel over by Main Street or 2 smaller channels, one on the east side of Main Street and then one where you're proposing now.
We haven't taken well, obviously in the plan, we hadn't had it coming through Main Street, and I think it was because I know Main Street, the way that the elevation works, it's got quite a few highs and lows through it. So it makes it hard to drain it through there. But if we were to do that, we could, you know, if you were to dig pretty deep, it might be a little hard to construct it, but you could have it route some of that flow and have that second channel be smaller.
So even though there are some challenges with Main Street, if you did a partial channel through the easier parts, wouldn't that alleviate some of the water drainage before it gets to the channel that you're proposing?
Say that one more time.
So I understand that you're bringing up the fact that there's some challenges to putting a channel on the east side of Main Street. But obviously not all of Main Street has those challenges. Is that correct?
I guess the lower portion may not have that challenge, although from what I remember, the sides of the wash are actually fairly high and it slopes down away from the wash over by Main Street. So the challenges occur at the wash, we'd have to, but I mean, you can always dig deeper. That's it's
Okay, so then on the channel that you're proposing, you show the width, and that's in feet, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, and how deep?
6 foot maximum.
6 foot at the deepest or all the way through?
It would be 6 foot at the deepest portion, and when you get into a more advanced design, rather than a plan, you can get those elevations hammered out a little bit more. But what we calculated was a maximum of 6 foot throughout the whole. Well, even in the upper sections, it's more along the lines of 4 foot deep.
Okay, so, and then is it going to be an open dirt ditch? Or are you going to line it with rocks or any other types of construction on it?
Yeah, we did have it in there to be riprap lined,
Okay.
so that we wouldn't be washing out.
Okay, so I guess the only suggestion that I would make or comment that I would make to the council is you might want to take a look at the possibility of having either an additional trench over by Main Street to help protect that road from flooding and also reduce the amount of water that comes into the west side properties of Main Street so they can reduce the size of that ditch. I mean, whether you dig a 45-foot wide, 6-foot ditch in one spot or 2 20-foot wide, 3-foot ditches, it's the same amount of digging. So that's the only thing that I would recommend.
Yeah, that's a good point. But looking at both scenarios, you can skin a cat in a million ways. To take care of the runoff, there's a lot of ways to do it. If you divide it up into 2 different projects where you have one on the Main Street and one over back lot lines of this subdivision and development, then it's just additional cost. So, you know, we could look at that, but with the deeper cuts, you know, it'd probably a significant amount more money. But
Well, as we're not taking any action on this tonight, this is the presentation. We're gonna take that into consideration and move on. Appreciate your not display, but presentation.
Yeah.
Works with me. And I'm sorry, can I get your name, sir? I didn't catch your name.
Online.
Online?
Yes, my name.
Walter.
Yeah, my name is Walter Josie.
Thank you, Mr. Josie.
You're welcome.
Okay, guys, got any questions? Thank you again. We'll move on to item 5. An agreement for engineering services for the town of Apple Valley General Plan by Sunrise Engineering. This is, I think we've worked through this. Everybody's up to speed on this. This is the agreement to have them do these studies.
We looked at this at the last meeting as far as approving, signing the agreement with UDOT. These are grant monies that we're receiving to pay for this. And so this is the actual agreement that is with Sunrise to engage them to spend the money that was given to us by grant.
Any additional questions or comments before we take the vote? Motion?
Long overdue, I'd say.
Agreed. Mr. Kingsley been long overdue. Mr. Butler has a record of being long overdue. Do I have a motion?
I will accept the agreement for engineering service for town of Apple Valley General Plan by Sunrise Engineering. Second.
Vote?
Aye.
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 Motion carried 4-0. Okay, item 6. Addendum to the Big Creek Water and Sewer Service Special Service District. We have worked through the verbiage on this. If you go to section 301 has been eliminated. If you go to the back of your documents there, you'll find a new revision amendment to this. Identified as section 3.01. We kind of worked through this, but kind of bring up to a final conclusion. I think the developer has agreed to step up and create that main gallon tank up front, as well as we make that part of this phase one construction. And then we eliminated the 360 acre feet of water shares. I think those are our three big issues. I think the developers here, I think we have anything, do you have something to add? All good. And this is pretty much ready to go unless you guys have any more challenges. Mayor, do you have any challenges with this? Mayor, do you have any challenges with this? If not, we'll entertain a motion.
I'm okay with it. It's, we've, I think Harold Merritt and Hank have worked this out, and it's, I don't have a problem with it.
It passed through the SSD earlier tonight, board meeting.
So this would be subject to the change of the 3.01 that's attached.
Right.
So.
Motion? Marty, would you like to give us a
I'll
motion?
make the motion, just want to make sure we have the right verbiage on there, guys. This from us, so. The agenda, Lake Plains Water and Sewer Special Service District.
Item 3.01.
And as advised through item 301. 3.301.
No second?
Second.
Vote?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 4-0.
Okay. Do you want to do motion?
Item number 8, discussion of possible action on the resolution providing for the creation of Jefferson Canyon Public Infrastructure District number 2. Number 7, discussion and possible action on resolution 2021-001 providing for the creation of Jefferson Canyon Public Infrastructure District number 1, District number 2, District number 3. Sean, can we just loop all three of these together?
Yes.
Okay.
In one action item.
I think we hammered this pretty good.
I think everything was, everything was accepted from the changes that we made, so.
Sean, you're good?
Yes.
You know, I just want to say for the record, these attorneys, you know, they like to come in the last minute and upset the apple cart after we've printed this novel of a, you know, we got to have a binder to hold all this stuff. There's so many pieces of paper. And then they issue a new adjustment the next day or the day before our meeting. And so there's an addendum that's an extra 150 some pages that each of you have. It's got a rubber band around it. That's the actual agreement that we're going to vote on, is the amended agreement, not the one that's that was included in our packet online. This information was tweaked a little bit by our attorney. So maybe Sean could tell us some of the highlights of the tweaking from what is in our book.
Before you do, Sean, I want to make sure you recognize you just got a chastisement.
I understand that.
You can make whatever's going
I would say this, attorneys are optimistic and we always think we can improve on perfection. So, really, the tweaks that we made to this were just to clarify the public infrastructure that would be built in and authorized to be built with the bond proceeds. And that if there was any changes from the infrastructure that's listed in the agreement, that they would really come to the town if there was another public infrastructure that they wanted to construct and get the town's approval to use the bond proceeds for that. So Just some minor clarifications that Devin was able to make on the fly while we were talking on the phone. So it looks good, and so we both put some
On
recommendations.
the phone, do we get a half rate?
Yes.
I'm speaking to you, Hanks. Okay. We have a motion on this?
I move that we approve resolution 2021 002, providing for the creation of Jefferson County Public Infrastructures District 1, District 2, and District 3 as amended 3 days ago.
Okay.
Second.
Want to, before we take the vote, I want to clarify, you said 2021-002, and it's actually
Okay.
01, yeah.
2021-0.
Just a clarification on that. They will be sending these up separately for the creation of these districts to the Lieutenant Governor's office. So can we break those up?
Okay.
I move that we.
Didn't we ask you first?
We did. You did ask that.
This is not that.
That's what I call a retraction.
Yeah.
It's an improvement on perfection.
Yeah, it's near perfect. Okay, so, I move we approve resolution 2021-001, providing for the creation of Jefferson County Public Infrastructure District Number 1.
Will we have a second? Second. Vote? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Vote carries 4-0.
I move that we pass resolution 2021-002, providing for the creation of Jefferson County Infrastructure District Number 2.
We have a second. Vote? Aye.
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 Vote carries 4-0.
I move that we approve resolution 2021-003, providing for the creation of Jefferson County Public Infrastructure District Number 3. 001, it says 003.
No, it is 0.
It is 003.
We've already done one.
We're on 9 now.
Oh, okay. Now, would you like a second?
I'll second.
Yeah, sorry, I heard you wrong way. Vote? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Vote carries 4-0. Approve. Okay.
Congratulations, Hank.
About time, huh?
You know, I was gonna be sentimental, and I decided not to until the mayor spoke up, but, you know, we have a wonderful community up here, and this is gonna be probably the largest thing that's happened to Apple Valley in a long time. The things that I've appreciated most, above anything else, is your willingness to work, not only with the community, but create something that can enhance our community and protect the, you know, the great climate that we have up here. And I know that, knowing Mr. Isaacson and the projects he's been involved in the past, I know that the passion he brings to this project will bring a great compliment to our community. And I personally, as a resident, applaud.
Thank you. By the way, Apple Valley is the most beautiful spot in the world right now. So.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 10, we're going to table item number 10, the agreement with Mrs. Kinsel LLC. They were not able to get their documentation put together. We'll table that the next meeting. Consent agenda.
That's item number 10 needs to be tabled.
Item number 10 is tabled. We don't have to make a motion on that, we can table, correct?
Yeah, let's just make a motion to table it.
Make a motion that we table item number 10, easement agreement between Kinsel LLC and Big Plains Water and Sewer Special Service District.
Second.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Table 4-0. Then we'll get some of our agenda. Invoice register, item number 11. You guys had a chance to go through this?
I didn't see anything. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm the man.
We updated the agenda. You probably have an old version, but number 11, we need to discuss and possibly act on appointing a treasurer. Is that right, Mayor?
On what?
Appointing a treasurer.
Oh, that's right.
Marty, Mayor,
I didn't I didn't see it on our agenda. Did you get that on there, John?
I did, it was noticed that way.
Okay, so we just didn't reprint the agenda, I guess.
You want to address that one, Marty?
I think that we Shanghai Paul. So
Sure.
I like that.
So I make a motion that Paul Edwardson is our treasurer for right now.
I'll second that one. Vote. Aye.
Aye.
Vote carries 4-0. Thank you, Paul. Now invoice register, item number 11. If it's still in 11. Any questions on item number 11? Move the motion.
This is not approval.
Marlo?
It needs approved, yeah. No, I'm just standing here.
Okay.
If you have any questions.
Do you have a motion on the register?
Yeah, we approved the invoice register, January 2021.
Second. Vote. Aye.
Aye.
Vote carried 4-0. Financial statements as of February 10th, 2021, item number 12. I went through this one, I didn't get through the other ones much. I'm good. Okay. A motion?
Make motion that we use the financial statements as of February 10th, 2021.
Second.
Thanks.
Aye.
Aye.
Carries 4-0. Town council meeting is item number 13. We're not taking action on number 13. We don't have any documentation. We'll go to 14. Town council meeting minutes 12/30/2020. Any questions, comments? No. Motion?
I guess it was added in a revision and it's not in our book. So it's in our online version, but we haven't had a chance to review it, so.
Item number 13 is.
13 is Marty.
I was talking about, sorry, I lost my place.
The minutes from item 13, town council meeting to 1/20/21 are not in our book.
But 14, item 14, 12/30/2020 is.
Yes, right. We're taking motion on item number 14. Motion?
Will we approve the town council meeting minutes of 12/30/2020?
Second? Aye.
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 4-0. Reports, recommendations, and announcements. Lots of applications received. Lots of application received.
There's not anything material from the mayor, maybe just gonna talk about it.
Mayor, on item number 15, you received an application for a lot split. AB 5136.
It's just a memo item on there. We don't have to discuss it.
No discussion.
Okay.
No reports, recommendations, announcements for anybody? Public comment. We'll open up for public comment.
Time to the public.
Everybody left.
I have a question.
I'm Alan Angel. I just wanted a quick,
Could you state your name, please?
I said my name is Alan Angel. Just wanted to- The Jefferson Canyon discussion you had last month, you guys are going to work out some details about the way they're going to handle waste. Can you bring us up to speed on what you decided on that?
Wastewater, you mean?
Yeah.
That you found in garbage. Yeah, so we've worked with them. They're going to put in, we worked out a regional, we're working on it, and as part of their preliminary plat that will be addressed for a regional reclaim plant that will service the community, not just their individual project.
Okay. that include the pond down the road there, but, you talked, in the discussion, you talked about moving the water down toward, Cook County.
We talked about the possibility of using lagoons. We talked about the possibility of using reclaim plants. They're going to work on putting a proposal together, submit to the town as part of the preliminary plan, and we'll address it at that time.
Gotcha.
When we know what the proposal is.
Okay.
But it looks most likely like a good package.
Yeah. Right. Thank you.
Ma'am, I'm sorry, there was a caller?
Yes, hi, this is Joan. I have a question about Sunrise Engineering's presentation.
Yes, ma'am?
Oh, you can hear me. So we have a FEMA grant in process, and I was wondering what the status of that is.
Mayor, can you give status on that grant?
We have two possible funding sources that we're addressing and working on. It takes so long to get this engineering and applications together. FEMA changed their grant criteria, and we didn't miss this opportunity on our last grant, but there's still two more of them that are in line that we already have. All the paperwork at this point is completely done. We're waiting on these application dates to come up, and I don't know offhand what those new dates are.
So have you published the map of the FEMA area that you're requesting a grant? How does it impact the presentation that Sunrise just did on the floodplain and their plans for the remediation?
It's the presentation today was an overview, and the packet itself has the details of all of the different components. So,
and they mentioned,
I don't know that
they mentioned the FEMA grant. Was the FEMA grant mentioned?
No.
So when will that be addressed? I'm a little confused because who's paying for all the flood remediation that was presented today and at other times? Who's paying for that?
Well, no one's paying for it right now because it's just engineering that tells us what we need to consider doing. So in the application process of a project, we have the information knowing what it takes to mitigate any project, no matter where it is in Apple Valley right now, because of the work we've done so far. So it doesn't matter where you go, including Hank's project or AV 1329 or Travis Home on the other side. We know how much water's flowing, where it's coming from, and what it takes to mitigate it. So having that information is valuable when it comes time to making decisions on subdivisions and projects. And in the case of AV 1329, it's very valuable in that we know that we need a detention basin there. And so we require the, I guess the right term would be that the applicant is willingly offering to help us with this mitigation by giving us the property, 4 acres of property thereabouts, to mitigate the detention basin, which is one component. It doesn't include a ditch, but he doesn't own the property where the ditch is. But if someone came in and wanted to put something in where that ditch is, then we would likewise require that. If we had the FEMA grant wouldn't cover the purchase of any of that land or easements. We would have to come up with that money out of our pocket to purchase that. So it's kind of a godsend that we have someone that wants to do that project, because he's now donating the land to us instead. And even though he's not completing 100% of the project, meaning pipelines and ditches and all that, it's a stepping stone to what we need to do. Then when we get the FEMA grant, we come back in and we know we own the property. Now we can add the pipeline. We can add the other components to that with the FEMA grant, with that ownership of the land in our pocket. And
so you're trying to say that the town is going to own that property where FEMA would be involved in their flood mitigation, but yes, that's Travis Wells' property. So you're saying he's deeding it to the town?
Yes. Yes.
And
And and the reason he doesn't want it is because he doesn't want to have to maintain it. And so basically they fence that off, and then we can take our heavy equipment in there anytime we want to clean that out. And so anytime we want to make it deeper, or if sediment has been washed in there because of a big, a big rain that came in, and it's filled up with sediment, we can take our backhoe and dump truck in there and we can clean it out anytime we want. And so that's.
So it seems a little curious if I believe you said that you're in the process of applying for 2 FEMA grants or 2 different FEMA grants, yes?
No, it's one FEMA grant.
No.
There's another agency that has funding available for this type of thing that is also on our target for an application.
So if you are changing the landscape, changing the land by allowing building and what that all entails, I don't know how that works in concert with a FEMA grant application. Are you going to wait until all of the building's done and then submit another FEMA grant? Was the other one denied? The first one?
We haven't got all of our paperwork into FEMA for an application as of yet. We were hoping to catch it for last year, and we didn't make the target deadline. They changed the program itself. They changed the name of it. They changed the scope of it. They changed a lot of things before we even applied. And that happens with the federal government. We're putting our ducks in a row based on one program, then they completely revamped it. But so it doesn't affect us, because in order for FEMA to come in and help pay for this mitigation, we needed to own that property. 1329 is going to be deeding that property to us. That gives us that ownership. And I don't know the value that you could put on that, but it's several $100,000 to buy 4 acres.
But that's not the whole of the property that's included in that floodplain where you were applying for the FEMA grant. It goes north of that, and then doesn't it also include Travis's property up on top as well? I think that was part of the presentation.
Are you talking about Travis Wells?
Holmes.
I don't know that Travis Holm is involved in this just yet, but if he ever decided that he wanted to move forward with that, it would require engineering for him to do that. That engineering would reveal what he had to do to mitigate any water and any flooding as well. He would have to then help mitigate that at that particular time. Right now, it's just open ground, and once he tries to file a plat, that's when we trigger that we require engineering. That engineering is going to determine what he has to do to help mitigate any floodwaters.
So the cost, if I'm hearing you correctly, in between your next filing for a FEMA grant or the other organization that you didn't specify, in between that, and in order to have these developments built, who's going to carry that cost?
Well, the developers digging the hole, they're putting in the berming requirements. I don't know all the requirements yet because we haven't engineered it, but lucky for us, Sunrise has done all this research, and the developers engineer, my understanding, they even have a meeting as soon as tomorrow to discuss some of this, but Sunrise is our engineering firm for this project. They're the ones who are going to help us hold the feet to the fire of that developer that helps us make sure that we're going to mitigate these floodwaters that are coming through there to whatever legal degree that we can at this time. And Marv's comment to me in a different meeting was that anything that we have done by this developer is going to make it less. He's not going to increase the problem. He's going to be significantly helping the problem. It won't eliminate it. If we have another 24-hour rainstorm like we did back in 2018, we're still going to have some floodwaters. It's not going to be as bad because of the amount of water we can detain in this detention basin. It's going to make a significant difference in helping that, but we're not fixing the problem completely. Most rains that come and hit this area, it doesn't take very much, 15 minutes and you've got waters in the ditch. This, 15 minutes of rain, probably you wouldn't see water in the ditch except off of the roads and the land, because this detention basin, 4 acres in size, that's 5-6 feet deep, is going to hold a significant amount of water, and that would catch that water. And we still have all the water from east of Main Street that's coming our direction, and it doesn't stop all of that. But this is just a first step in trying to help mitigate this. This will make it better, but it's not the total, the total of what we need for the whole project. There's no doubt about it.
Right. So I think 2 years ago, we were talking about this FEMA grant, and I thought that it had been presented or to FEMA, and then I didn't hear that it was canceled or we missed a deadline. So now, do you have all the documentation? I know, I heard you say that. So do you have all of the documentation now for this next grant application, the 2 grants that you're talking about? Do you have that prepared? Can we see it?
Yeah, Sunrise Engineering has it, and I'm sure they could give it to you.
Oh, great. That would be wonderful. So it'll be available to the town to take a look at.
Yeah, we could ask them for it. The things they have to do this is to determine what is the damage that can be caused by the flooding and how many houses can be damaged. And so they have to do a calculation that comes up with, what is the damage potential versus the cost of mitigating that potential, and all those calculations are done, and that's all part of the application. So.
Perfect. Okay.
I haven't seen it, but that's what my understanding is. It's all done, ready for submission. So.
It is ready for submission.
Yeah.
Okay. So we would expect probably another 2-year turnaround, I suppose.
I hope not. I don't know I'm sorry, I forget the agency. It has a whole different acronym. It's not one I'm familiar with that they are familiar with. Sunrise does projects all over the place. So they have offices, not just in town, but all up and down the state. They have specialists on staff that's what they do is funding. They know the programs, and they mentioned that they have a potential funding source that they're going to try to fund with. I just don't remember the acronym.
Oh, that's fine. So basically for a couple of years, the last couple of years or so, Sunrise Engineering has been working towards the grants, and now they're going to have to rework it because of the development that's coming in. Yes?
No, it doesn't change anything. The development just gives us ownership of the land. It doesn't change anything. The engineering that the developer has to do with their project. And then we also look at it that we're not going to put anybody building a home in that project in harm's way of the water that we know that's going to go through there. And so they have to engineer all of that flow so that everybody living there has a good experience living there. At the same time, we're not flooding anybody downstream. We're improving what's going on downstream. That doesn't mean that we're not going to have floodwaters come through there if we have a hard enough rain. But if they don't build anything, we have that happening right now anyway.
Which you would use the FEMA grant to mitigate, right, without putting homes and other structures in the midst of it.
Right,
That's kind of where I'm coming from.
right. And that's
Okay, I think I've asked you enough questions.
That's our goal, and part of their project is they're even trying to, I mean, this project could end up being as much as $5 million. And part of what they're also trying to do is shore up the wash itself with, you've seen it in, you know, large washes or rivers where they put the big boulders along the hillsides. That's even in part of their goal, if they can get the funding for it, they even want to shore up the wash with big boulders. And so if we can get as much as $5 million, we'll even fix the wash, because there's a lot of people that are losing in their backyards, sloughing off into the wash. And so we're trying to mitigate that as well if we can get the money.
Okay, thank you.
John? Thank you, John.
Hey, John, would you say your last name for you?
Dinneen.
Thank you.
Any other public comments?
I'd like to add a couple additional comments to the flood plan that we saw from Sun.
Walter Josie. Say your name, please.
I'm sorry?
Say your name again, I apologize.
Yeah, sorry, Walter Josie.
Thank you, Mr. Josie.
So, since this thing is so big, I think we could rename it the Erie Canal West if I, but anyway, you know, and adding on to what Marty was talking with the other citizen about, that the property for that portion of the flood mitigation is going to be donated, then have you guys thought about how you're going to acquire the property to put this large channel in, if you indeed put it there?
I missed your words on some of that.
Yeah, so my question is that won't the town have to acquire property to put that large 45-foot width, 6-foot deep canal in there that we could
Right.
actually?
That's all true. We don't have to purchase it, but we do need an easement. There's a couple ways to get that property, and one of them is condemning it. But that means us having to buy, you know, probably 20, 30 acres of land that goes along that back fence of your property and my property. And that's, you know, kind of a non-starter to write that big of a check. But you know, it could be that we can find some funding somewhere to help pay for that, but cooperation from the landowner would be the best way to go. Because even the landowner that wants to sell that and do something with it, because that, as you know, there's a for sale sign on that property. And so getting cooperation in the way of an easement or something would be ideal, which, you know, anybody that ever did something with that property would be required to participate in this flood mitigation if they decided to do something, and we would require at that time. So even if we don't get a grant, this is still in place, and someone decides they want to build homes behind us, that would be a requirement that we create that channel.
You know, I kind of asked the engineering team a surprise question when I asked them to give me a percentage of the flood waters east and west of the Main Street. And so they gave me a you know, off the top of their head number, but I think that number is probably not quite accurate. You know, if I just took a look at that map, it seems to me that there's way more surface area on the east side of Main Street than there is on the west side. So I'm sorry, go ahead, Mark.
I was gonna say, it could be right that that's the case, but the other thing that I noticed when I drive through there is that there's some natural waterways already in place, and that's what makes it a challenge to put a ditch. You can't just, I mean, some of those waterways, as you know, they're, you know, 10, 15 feet deep, and you have to have fall to create a place for that water to go. And I don't think it's realistic along that east side of Main Street to dig a ditch that's 15 feet deep that equals the depth of some of those washes. And so even though they're showing a lot of that water coming, you know how deep some of those channels are that like go through that wash next to your house. Some of those are quite deep before it ever gets to your house.
Well,
If I could intervene too, I want to remind you too that it's not just the surface area that calculates, it's also the type of vegetation on that area. So when you go east of Main Street, you have a lot more dense vegetation you do at the very bottom. So increased vegetation can also decrease the amount of water that comes off there. So it's not just the size of it, it's also what's on the surface of that ground. So that percentage may not be that far off.
yeah, well, it could be, or maybe it is. So we don't really know. It would be interesting for them to get a really hard number on that, or a harder number than just off the top of their head. Because that way you can make a better decision. Now, based on, these days my memory is not too good. So based on my memory of Main Street, because I haven't been down there for a while, but when you're talking about a wash that comes to the east side of Main Street, Marty, I don't think any of those washes go underneath Main Street except for the main part of Gould's Wash. Do I have that wrong?
In my opinion, you do. There's the Main Street itself has large dips where it dips way down, and there are culverts in there, but the road itself dips down to that 10, 12 feet deep to where you disappear in that gully. And that if you were there at the wrong time, that thing's probably flowing over the road, or could be. And so that's where, when it goes that deep, having a trench go along Main Street, what do you do when you hit that trench? You can't put a 6 foot deep trench and all of a sudden you have this massive wash there, but these guys have, when they look at the topographical maps, they have grid lines on there because all of this is mapped out. They know exact elevations of everything. And these grid lines give them the contours and, 1 or 2 foot elevations, and they can tell exactly where that water's flowing based on their computer modeling. Their computer modeling that I've seen in their office is quite amazing. They can plug in a rainstorm and it shows exactly where the flow is because it just turns it all blue. And so they've done a lot of work to understand what the problem is. And based on that understanding, they're figuring out what can they do to best mitigate it. And the thing is none of us are anxious for something to be, going in out there. But what I like about this is we've done the precursor work that helps them anytime anyone want to build anything anywhere. We know where the water flow is, and then they can help us. How can we mitigate it? Which means it's going to be better for Apple Valley in any direction that we go. So
just a hypothetical, if both locations were equal, their proposed versus a trench on the east side of Main Street, which trench would be the most advantage for the community? Which location?
Well, I'm going to intervene for a second, Martin, because you're trying to narrow it down to just a singular trench in one location or another. And trenching and traveling collection of water is treated, if you could envision roadways, you have collector roadways and you have secondary roadways in your community, and you increase your traffic and increase the size of the road. The trenching that you're talking about is much like a roadways. It works as a series of small transportation waterways into a large collection area waterways. So the big channels that come across there are moving east and west. Your plan and your goal for planning your cross roadways when you cross elevation that way would be to actually take the water north and south. So your ditchway on Main Street is accurate, but it's of a smaller nature to take water to the larger ditch. The larger ditch then takes it to the west into this ditch and into the Gould's Wash. And what they were trying to say earlier is that yes, you are correct. You can eliminate that by going up to Main Street, but it will require a larger ditch than what we have of 45 feet. So to say that we're going to fix the entire area, you can't simply do it with just one ditch, because the first time we go up there and start developing up on Main Street, We introduce hard surfaces such as asphalt and concrete, then the speed of the water accelerates and the collection becomes even greater at that point because it takes more water. Water off a roadway can move faster than it does across dirt. So it's not a matter of just one simple ditch being located in one location or the other. I hope that helps, but that's a large consideration of why you can't just move the ditch from one spot to another.
So am I to take your comment that you're thinking that we need 2 ditches?
No, I was addressing your comment about could we move it from one spot to another spot.
Yeah, so my hypothetical is based on if everything was equal, which is more advantaged on the, you think a ditch, sorry?
They're not equal.
And I know that they're not equal, but I'm just asking the question, if they are equal, if they were equal, then which location would be the most advantaged location?
I don't know, this is a question for the engineer. When he takes into consideration the entire area. It's something we can take a look at. We'll look at it and find the best routing. The engineer will come out with the best channeling of waters.
Well, the fun part about this is when you want to start doing what if kind of scenarios, all the modeling is together, and you know they can play with that stuff, and they are able to answer that question because of elevations are present, and they can show you we can't do the ditch here because of this right here, you know, and it's probably an elevation, you know, bump in the road kind of a thing that is going to deflect that water a different direction from what you're hoping to go to. But those scenarios can be played with because we have done the homework.
I think what you should be saying is that we can't do it because of the bump road. Then it becomes a cost of efficiency at that point. And to bend down a road in the past and taking a very limited comment and stating that yes, you can do it, it requires a larger ditch. It becomes a cost efficiency issue at that time. So it is always less impactful and cheaper to build smaller and multiple ditches than it is to build one larger ditch. It'll turn out that way every single time. So I think if you take a look at the existing flows that are on that property and the amount of water that will be moving across those grounds, you know, that's going to be a determining factor. If it turns out to be on Main Street, then it turns out to be on Main Street. But I think based on the study they're showing us right now, the model that is there, it's going to have to be done on the westerly portion because it's not just Main Street we're trying to correct, it's also to the north that we're trying to correct. So if our ditch of 12 feet wide or 45 feet away from Main Street would do nothing for the northern basin that's draining from the church property, as I call it, the Travis Wells property. So it would have to be located down on the west side in order to pick up all that area as well.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. I would like to make a comment on the what ifs. I think that the aspect of input to get what ifs is important when you're going to take a look at a project this immense and the amount of money that's going to be spent and then the effect that it's going to have. Because what ifs can create creativity. And so that's why I'm asking the hypothetical. And if I'm just going to make an assumption because I'm having a difficult time getting an answer to it, but if I make an assumption that the location on the east side of the Main Street would be more advantage if everything was equal, then you can always come up with creative ways of figuring that out. And then when you take a look at the future development of Apple Valley, then the property that's going to be going from my property border, Marty's property border to the west, to the east out to Main Street is probably going to be a prime development property. And then you're going to put a big, huge trench in the middle of that. So when you think about it, if you could, with enough creative approaches, put a trench on the east side of Main Street, and let's just say that trench will handle 50% of the water problem. Well, 50% is a lot. And then if somebody puts in a subdivision in the property on the west side of Main Street, then you can have the same approach as what you're talking about for the proposed subdivision to the north. which includes so I'm just asking some what if questions because I think what ifs are important because it can create creativity and come up sometimes with better solutions. So if you guys would consider those, I would appreciate that.
Yeah, we could do that. And the thought I had at the time is, that ditch behind your house and my house is not unlike what we see in large desert areas where behind the housing project, you have this ditch that's made for flood waters. And, so it moves any housing project or other thing off the fence line 100 feet because you need that buffer area where some flood waters are going to be, directed to, and it creates that buffer zone. But it's something we can look at because they're able to look at those scenarios, the elevations, and it could be that even maybe there's a way to deflect some of the because I was just out there today. That's how recent I've been on Main Street. And maybe there's a ditch someplace and we can divert that in some way long before it ever gets to the flatter area, because some of those ditches are quite deep and then they start to flatten out and then it ends up being a river through your property. And maybe there's a way to deflect that at Main Street towards the wash early on and it mitigates it before it ever gets to our property. So there could be even some ditching that can be done, even though it won't be a ditch as long as this. They chose that location because they felt like there would never be roads and things like that intersecting that part, and so it looked like the natural place to put it. But I appreciate your feedback on it. It's something we can always look at and consider the options of.
I think that's wouldn't it have been wonderful if 23 years ago, when they started building down there, that they were going through the process we're going now? We were doing the engineering, we're going through and having this process done. I remember 30, 40 years ago when I was a kid, when there was no houses out there, that was marsh out there. There was pussy willows and everything else growing up in that marsh there where there's houses. Where Marty's house is at, where all that stuff's at. And who did the engineering for those people, those poor souls that put in basements right there back then? We're doing engineering right now and taking all these what ifs and the projects that are there, and we're trying to alleviate the problems that homeowners have problems with if someone didn't do this work. And doing this work with the engineering work is alleviating the issues and the problems without the know-how. If we didn't know this, we just allow a subcontractor or a contractor go in and build 50 homes without doing the proper engineering. At least this gives us the tool that we can see that this engineering needs to be done, and that some contractor can't just come in and say, well, we don't have to do that, we'll do this. We already know what needs to be done in certain phases that happens, and the engineers can keep us updated on what flows change where they need to go. I'm having a hard time seeing how just one ditch on the east side of Main Street is taking care of the problem off of Zion Drive. If we need two ditches, let's look at that from what the graphs are given to us by the engineers and take out the guesswork out of it and put the proper modeling together. We could sit here for the next 3 hours and talk about what ifs. I think we look at the proposals we've been given based on what we have in our town, and as those things change and Main Street changes, then of course that's got to be relooked at with the engineering that's in place versus how that's going to affect each one. I guess I'm not seeing the point in sitting here and going through the guesswork of what ifs, because we could do that all night long.
Well, because we're out of we're still in public meetings, we don't seem to have anybody else, I'm gonna make a statement, and I think in behalf of Mr. Josie. I think there's two things he's trying to acquire. One, he doesn't want us to just rush into it without looking at the broad spectrum, which I agree with. And two, if you can make, if you can get 2 bar ditches that half the size of a large one, it's less of an impact on your visuals, and less of an impact on the ground you take down. So I think that the proper way to do this is let the engineers go through their modeling and let's come up with the most feasible program, and it may in fact turn out to be 5 ditches instead of 2 ditches. And we'll go from there. And I agree, I'm glad we're taking action for long-term use instead of what they've done in the past with short-term use. Okay, there's no other public comments, we're gonna close the public comment section. And we will move to a motion for adjournment.
I'm gonna do adjourn this meeting.
Second. Vote. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Jones, thank you.